All right. Welcome to another edition of Sabbath Lounge. This is Matt.
And Jake here.
And we are bringing you a series called what, Jake?
Prove It.
Prove It. And if you're listening to this just in a podcast, keep in mind that there are visuals to go with this in YouTube in a playlist called Prove It. But Jake, what is this Prove It about? Why are we doing this?
So this is when you go to someone and you say, hey, I've been reading my Bible, and I think we should be keeping the Torah, the commandments, the laws from, that are written in the Old Testament. And then if you say that to someone, they're going to say, oh yeah, prove it, maybe. Yeah. And so this is so, I'm an engineer, so I think very analytically. So this kind of thing appeals to me, this kind of making it work out in your mind. It has to be consistent and not contradict and that kind of thing. All things we talk about in the first episode. But so this is some verses that that while I'm reading and while Matt and I are reading, we kind of run across these and think, hey, this is why we believe the way we do. Mm-hmm.
And hopefully it can be a guide for you if you don't know what verses to go to, and maybe these are some that you haven't seen before. Bottom line is, we want you to read these verses for yourself.
In context.
And know kind of where to go.
Right.
So, and we appreciate if you leave comments, likes, hit the bell notifications, and maybe leave us something in the comments to let us know you listen to us, like giving us shofars or ram's horns or maybe something about the particular episode.
Right.
So. And we certainly appreciate you being here, and let's jump right into it, Jake.
Let's jump into it.
So this is number what in the series?
Number 6.
So, and Jake, we're still unclean.
Still unclean. So the whole point of this section is to show that there's still unclean things. So.
All right, number 29. Is 2 Corinthians 6:17. And by the way, once again, you're listening to number 29. There are 28 other things you should go listen to as well. We appreciate it if you do that.
Right.
And so this is also on the YouTube playlist. So number 29, 2 Corinthians 6:17. Wherefore, come out from among them, and be ye separate, saith Yahweh, and touch not the unclean thing, and I will receive you. That sounds a lot like something I've read in
It sounds like something you'd read in the Torah, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. And if, Paul does a lot of talking as if his audience understands the Torah. And so, like we've said before, if you want to know what Paul's saying, you have to read what Paul has read. So, so that's going to help you to know what Paul's talking about if you know the Torah. Mm-hmm. And so here he's saying, don't touch the unclean thing. How are you going to know what an unclean thing is to be touched?
Well, it would be dirty.
But I don't think that's what he's talking about.
Don't touch the dirty, children.
Right.
So, but there are a lot of people who taught that for a long time.
Oh, yeah?
Probably especially nuns and moms that wanted their dirty children to be clean. Maybe that was said to me as a child.
Or you're a very dirty child.
maybe. And but that concept of cleanliness is next to godliness. It's true, but it's not necessarily talking about the dirt on your hands.
Right. So it goes actually that cleanliness next to godliness. It's similar to be holy, for I am holy.
Yes.
And it's actually from the same section of Scripture, because when you go to Leviticus 11 and learn about the clean and unclean laws, he says, and when he's talking about touching unclean things, he says, don't do that, be holy, for I am holy.
Yeah.
So
when you have to read the text to know what is unclean. Otherwise, you just define it with whatever you want to, like what I just did.
Right.
And go, well, my hands are dirty, they're unclean. But that's not what he's talking about.
Right. So in the comments, if you've heard this being unclean in the New Testament version of unclean, in the comments, put what you've heard that is. Or if you don't know, maybe make a note of that too or something.
Yeah.
I'd be interested to hear, because I don't get a lot of answers back on this when I talk to certain people, but if you're one to say that we don't have to do the law anymore and uncleanness isn't a thing anymore, please explain this verse.
All right, moving on. Number 30, Ephesians 5:5. For this ye know, that no whoremonger, nor unclean person, nor covetous man, who is an idolater, hath any inheritance in the kingdom of Messiah and of Elohim. Well, I can tell you, I don't want to be any of those things.
They don't sound good.
No. Mm-mm.
Okay. Do you know how not to be a whoremonger?
Yes.
Do you know
don't
how...
be idolatrous.
Do you know how to not be covetous?
Yes.
Do you know how to not be an idolater?
Yes.
Do you know how to not be an unclean person?
The Torah tells me these things, sir.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So I would never before, I wouldn't have gone through the list and go, I know how to not do that, I know how to not do that. Because I would get stuck, I would imagine if I did, I would get stuck on this unclean person. I'd be like, well, I got to know what that is to not do it.
Or people just transfer. What I was taught is, hey, don't do bad stuff. This is all bad. Don't do it.
Yeah.
And there's a little more to it than that.
Yeah. That really kind of doesn't tell you anything that way.
Because if you define it as just don't do bad stuff, well, that you're changing Scripture, because he's telling you, what the bad stuff is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not us that gets to pick.
Right. Yeah, and
because each one of us might say something different.
Exactly.
And we might weight and value things differently than the next guy, and so I'm glad none of us are picking.
Right. And I hear a lot of talk about, like we were talking before, we want to be like Messiah. We want to mirror Messiah. We want to walk like him.
Great.
And we want to, if someone accused you of following the Bible, would there be enough evidence to accuse you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so those are all things that we hear in church, and at least I did, and yet it means something completely different when you put the fact that, these things are talking about Torah.
Mm-hmm.
So we might not be saying anything necessarily different. It's the paradigm that's different.
Yeah.
So okay, moving on.
Okay. Number 31, Revelation 18:2. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, and is become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and cage of every unclean and hateful bird. Once again, Revelation, unclean.
What's an unclean bird?
It's a dirty bird.
A dirty bird.
Not the Atlanta Falcons, but
well, yeah, that would
but
be
a
an unclean bird.
A dirty bird. Yeah, so maybe that's what that meant.
How do you know that a falcon is an unclean bird?
The Torah defined it for me.
That's right.
I didn't have to guess.
That's not something you'll find spelled out in the New Testament, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of what is unclean. Now, something interesting, I think, about the reason that I think things like Revelation stating these unclean birds and things like that is because it's talking about this time period, right? Because there's a lot of dispensational theology of, well, that was that time period. Now we're in the church age, if you want to call it that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so this is in this age where he's describing things as unclean birds. So, and we'll get into some other verses too further down the series, but like Isaiah, right? It's talking about this time period and how he thinks about unclean things. So it's just important to know that there's several verses out there discussing it.
Yeah, yeah. And then number 32, Acts 10:28. And he said unto them, Ye know how that it is unlawful, know how that it is an unlawful thing for a man that is a Jew to keep company or come into one of another nation. But Elohim hath showed me that I should not call any man common or unclean. Sounds like Peter's vision.
It is Peter's vision.
And it's is he saying anything about food? Or is he talking about people?
Yeah, a lot of times it's not said this way, but the intent is the same. Where I've heard, we shouldn't call any man common or unclean. Also, you can go eat ham sandwiches.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So that's not how it's said, but the utilitarian aspect of it is that's the effect. It's the same effect.
Yeah, yeah, and he's just saying, and Peter, and the reason why this vision is so powerful for Peter, he's like, okay, I get it. You called these animals food or and not food, or clean and unclean, but you have not done that with people.
Right.
And he's like, okay, I got it.
Well, here, there's a lot of interesting things in this,
Yeah.
but here, just in this verse, he says it's unlawful for a man that's a Jew to keep company with someone with a Gentile.
Is that Torah law?
Well, you'd have to show the Torah law. If you know the Torah law, you know that that's not a Torah law. You know that's a Pharisaical law, right?
And I think that's where a lot of people get in trouble that want to come at this movement, if you will. They like to bring up the Pharisaical things, and we all agree those are bad.
Right.
None of us are wanting to do those things, because it is very clear that was not the right way to think. And over in the scripture, you see where he addresses these ideas that were bad, and he makes it very clear. This, especially in this particular case, you're not supposed to do that. And so they would, do things like they would absolutely refuse to sit in the same room, to have a meal with someone that it wasn't like them, wasn't Jewish.
Right.
Even if they believed, and so I think they ran into problems in the early church where people who believed like them, who were grafted in, just like we talked about in a previous episode, and they would be like, we can't sit with you.
Right, and you saw Paul actually address Peter for doing that.
Yeah.
And an
There's an argument.
earlier verse. And so this idea of just this whole vision is important. This idea of clean and unclean. And so here he's giving the answer to what the vision is. Mm-hmm. Peter comes down, he's confused about what the vision is, and then he goes, oh wait, he sees the people at the door, and he goes, Yahweh's showing me I shouldn't call any man common or unclean. Mm-hmm. And so, interestingly, this is post-resurrection, right? And Peter is still saying, I have not eaten anything common or unclean.
Yeah.
So he's still keeping the clean and unclean laws at this point.
Yeah.
So pretty interesting.
All right, and so that is coming to the end of this episode of Prove It, and this is one of many. So which one is this one?
This is 6.
So there are 5 others, and so what were the other 5?
We had a first things first. Then we had sin, the commandments, identity. And flesh versus the spirit. Mm-hmm. I think you want to flip flesh versus the spirit and identity. Yeah. For the order.
And so you can find that in a YouTube playlist with some visuals that have the scriptures. And so if you're flying blind and listening on the podcast, it might be easier on the eyes, but actually our video is not here. So, but you might try that. And so we appreciate you liking, commenting, subscribing.
Yep.
And Google us for more information. And once again, Jake, do we have all the answers?
Not all of them.
No.
We have some answers, I think.
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
you know,
all the answers that involve you going to the Word.
Right. That's the answer.
Yeah.
Exactly. So go out there and prove it.
Yep, that's right. Well, that's it. And this is Matt and
Jake.
signing out.